Hi everyone. This is the first lesson in a series of lessons on rural landscapes. The following sequence of lessons focuses on the types of rural landscape they are and where you would find them, and that's going to focus on map work. Then we'll move into the conflicts that occur within rural landscapes and the solutions to those conflicts, and that will have a case study focus. Then we'll look at the changes in rural landscapes in developed countries and finally in developing countries. This is quite a large unit, so it's really important that you make sure you've read all your notes, of course, and watch this full sequence of lessons. So let's get started. First of all, what is a rural landscape? We're talking about farming landscapes and countryside landscapes here. So, lesson 1. Which land uses go where is a simplified way of expressing this. What we're being asked here by the SQA is, which areas of land are best suited to certain land uses? Now, the lesson I'm going to give you here focuses on certain land uses. There are lots and lots of land uses, so I've decided to focus on some of the most commonly used. So, what is a land use? Basically, it's any economic use of the land. So, for example, we might talk about farming. We might talk about energy production in the form of wind turbines. We might talk about construction or even quarrying. Any economic use of the land is a land use. As I said, we're going to focus on some specific examples. So, example 1. As usual, if you see text with yellow background, that's notes for you to take down. So if you have missed these notes or want to stay ahead of the course, then you should make sure that you're copying these out. So just pause the video and you'll have plenty of time. Wind turbines, as you see in the picture, are a means of generating energy by trapping the power of the wind. And you're being asked, what is a good location for building wind turbines? Well, as you can see in the photo, they're built on high ground because it's more likely to get good wind speed. They tend to be considered as ugly structures by some people, and therefore they are built in remote locations, so they spoil the view for fewer people. They do need to be accessible though, because they require maintenance, and of course they need to be constructed in the first instance. So there needs to be some nearby road access. And they need to be in a clear, open area, and so the area is not being used for anything else. So that's why remote hilltops work really well. If you can find an area on a map that has those 4 features, then you will score 4 marks for why wind turbines would be appropriate to that location. Land use 2 is forestry. Forestry is where we grow trees and then wait for them to mature and then cut them down and turn them into timber for various industrial usages. That can vary, of course, from furniture to paper production and beyond. Now, where do we put trees? Well, we put them on steep slopes and in wet, poor quality soil, largely because trees are pretty tough. They can survive in those difficult situations where more delicate crops would not be able to survive. Trees can survive in the cold. That means on the tops of hills are a good location, or on the sides of hills where it's colder. Steep, cold, poor quality soils are difficult to make money out of. But trees make a profitable use out of these poor quality areas. And again, as you can see in the photo, machinery is required for logging forest plantations. So you do need the area to be accessible by some form of road. So again, if you can find some steep land, even better, some steep land that's high up, then you've found a location that's steep, that's likely to have poor quality soil, it's likely to be cold, and therefore it's not likely to be a profitable area of land, and you can build those marks. Water storage and supply is the next common example. What do we mean by this? Well, water storage and supply is when we have reservoirs, as you see in the photo. The area of water trapped behind the dam is a store of water used to provide drinking water to nearby settlements. They can also have the dual function of providing energy if the dam is turned into a hydroelectric dam, where the water is allowed to drain out through a spinning fan blade at the bottom, known as a turbine, and that spinning blade, which is made to spin by the water flowing through it, creates electricity. You will need a large body of water in order to make this work. So if you've managed to find on your map a body of water that you could put a dam across, that's a good start. Narrow valleys create ideal locations because you're going to have to build a wall across the water to trap the water behind it. And so it's easier to block a narrow valley than it is to block a wide valley. Higher ground tends to be sensible because it has a higher level of rainfall, and clearly you're going to need a lot of rain to create the levels of water required. And once again, you're going to need access to the area for maintenance and construction. Tourism is an economic use of the land, and in order for an area to be suitable to tourism, you're looking for things that tourists could use. And on a map, that's quite straightforward, because tourists can make use of a lot of different things. For example, footpaths would be something which a tourist could make use of. Lakes for swimming or boating on, rivers and forest walks are all valid examples. Beauty spots have picnic sites and campsites and viewpoints which are readily identifiable symbols on the map. But don't forget that tourists need to be able to get to these locations, so a local train station or the availability of parking for cars is equally important. Finally, every map is different, so don't forget to look at the map and look at it in detail, because there's going to be lots of local named examples of famous buildings or historical sites or, for example, castles that tourists could go and visit. Cattle farming is one form of pastoral farming that takes place. Cattle can prosper in pretty tough conditions, but they do need to be near a farm for shelter. So you're looking for a farm on the map that would be suitable for sheltering the cattle. And the symbol for a farm is the letters FM. You don't want the area to be very, very mountainous and hilly. You want kind of gentle lowland hills. And that's because if you're putting cattle on very mountainous areas, actually the meat that you'll create is poor quality as the cattle become over-exercised and the meat will become tough. Also, you'll need a large open area of land required for the herd. Hill sheep farming is a more commonly used example. And sheep, unlike cattle, can go in really, really tough areas. They can survive in cold, wet conditions, so hilltops are appropriate. They can largely take care of themselves, so remote areas are fine. You can be quite far away, you don't need to be close to a farm building. You will need a large area of land, a large area of open space required for the sheep. And sheep don't require high quality grazing, unlike cattle. So hilltops are appropriate. On hilltops you tend to find the soil quality is poor, and therefore the plant life that grows in that soil has got a lower nutritional value. So hilltops are good because sheep can survive on the poor quality grass that grows there. Now this is the kind of question that we're preparing for. In this instance, you're being asked to choose two different land uses. So for example, we might choose farming and we might choose tourism. And we're going to explain how the area showed on a map is suitable for the two land uses chosen. For 5 marks, if you consider the number of notes that you've just looked at or you've just written, it's not difficult to score a full 5 marks, but it is easy to misread the question. You're looking for two different land uses here, So you'll write two separate paragraphs, one for farming and one for tourism, or whichever one you prefer to choose. And you need to explain. So you need to say that sheep are going to survive on the tops of the hills because the tops of the hills have poor quality soil, and sheep can survive on the poor quality grass that grows there. So your sentences are going to be quite extended and quite detailed. So let's look at some real life examples. You might be asked, why is this area suited to tourism and to forestry? So let's say we've chosen tourism and forestry. Why is this area suited to it? Well, you can pause the video now and try and figure some things out for yourself. For example, can you spot some high up, steep land? Use the contours and the contour values to determine that. An area that's accessible by a road or a track. Maybe there's already an area that's being used for forestry, which would be an ideal piece of map evidence because, of course, it proves that the area is suitable to forestry. And for tourism, what things can you see? Is there parking available? Are there tourist facilities available? Are there local things that tourists can use and that tourists can go to? Okay, so let's look at some answers. First of all, the land is not very flat. It's quite wet in places, so it's not good for farming, but trees can survive, remember, in those poor quality soils. Now, normally, for identifying the explanatory factor and then for providing the map evidence, you can get marks for both parts, as you can see I've demonstrated there. We talked about access for machines. Here's a clever way of spinning that into a different mark. The local settlements will be able to provide a labour force for the maintenance of the forest and for felling the trees. I mentioned this already. Because there is already a forest in this area, you can say they clearly grow well in this area as there's a number of coniferous plantations already. That's a useful trick to be able to pull. Just bear in mind, though, that you are looking for large areas of forest when you're making that argument. You're not looking for tiny little areas of forest land. And how do I know this is a plantation? Well, there's two clues. One is that it's all coniferous. It's the little Christmas tree shape icon. And two, it's got these rather odd straight edges. And natural forests don't grow with straight edges. So this is more likely to be a planted forest that has been planted for the purpose of being grown and then chopped down. In terms of in terms of renewable energy, we might consider that this is a coastal area, which is great because it's going to have offshore wind power and wave power. That's a clever way of spinning a wind power mark. I've already mentioned that you could look at the hillier areas. For example, this hilltop here would be suitable for wind turbines. But if you've got a coastal location, that's another way of scoring that same mark. So the area would be suitable as it's hilly, where there's stronger winds, and there are a number of tracks which provide access for maintenance. You can see the road in pink going across the map here, and these tracks lead up into the steeper hill areas and would give you access for maintenance. A more subtle point that I'm not sure I would expect you all to have off the top of your head is that renewable energy doesn't just have to be wind turbines. Renewable energy can be things like biomass, where we rot plant matter down into fuel, and the heat and the gas created in that process can be used to make fuel. If I just backtrack for a second to the tourists question. I did ask you a minute ago if you could see what things tourists could use in this map area, and you can see that I've zoomed out of the map a little bit. With tourism, there's lots and lots of different things you can say. For example, there's a camping and caravan site to stay at. When you're writing this sentence, And all of these sentences, please pay attention to the level of detail that I am writing them in. Do not simply say, there is a camping and caravan site at 887641. That's not good enough. You need to say why it's relevant. So it's important to include the detail that tourists would be able to stay at the caravan and camping site at 887641. It's easy to miss because they're kind of almost because they're so obvious. There's not a little blue tourist map symbol for them, but you can see that this is a beach, a sandy beach, and that is of course something that tourists would be attracted to enjoying. There's a number of hotels on the map, and with a little bit of time spent, you can see I found one over here in the east as well, and that is going to be brilliant because there's places for people to stay. There's an historical castle, for example, to visit, and they can also go fishing in the pier. It just depends how much imagination you have, but there's actually lots and lots of stuff to do. There's parking available for tourists, there's good views looking out over the cliffs, there's a walking route here on the coastline you can see there. There's a PH, a public house, that's a pub that the tourists could go and visit. And notice the fort symbol. Look at the script that it's written in. You can see another one just there. And you can see here, it says in that fancy script, hut circle and field system. These are ancient remains of ancient societies, and they're really popular tourist destinations because people want to see that historical stuff. So there's loads of stuff to look at for tourism. Okay, our next lesson is going to be on land use conflicts, which is how these land uses that I've explained come into disagreement with each other and how those disagreements are solved. Rewatch this video and make sure that you've taken all of the notes and that you've practiced using those notes on a variety of different maps. Okay, I hope that's helped.